Before the lies are told again, what really happened at Coral Gardens? Every year at this time, Jamaicans are treated to false stories of the persecution, harassment, and massacre of Rastafarians in 1963 on the order of the then Prime Minister, Sir Alexander Bustamante. The stories are based on a violent encounter between members of the Jamaica Constabulary and a particular band of Rastafarians that took place on Thursday, April 11, 1963 at Coral Gardens, located roughly 6 miles from Montego Bay. In the 62 years since the violence, a tissue of lies has been built around the incident by the JLP's political adversaries, by Rastafarians, and by university intellectuals, all for different reasons. For the People's National Party, it provided a way to demonize the ruling JLP government and tarnish the reputation of Sir Alexander Bustamante. For a particular group of Rastafarians, it has been used as a basis on which to claim compensation for personal injury, a claim that was honored in 2017 by the allocation of funds to persons who claimed to have been victims of the police operations. At no point except for a brief unchallenged appearance before the Ombudsman have the claimants offered specific details about damage allegedly done to them. For members of the UWI academic community, notably one Horace Campbell, it has provided occasion for him to romanticize the event in the context of Rasta resistance and declare, "Not since the Sam Sharp revolt in the same region has there been such a mass arrest of black people." The reporters of the incident never bothered to give it context, as having happened 3 years after the attempt by Claudius Henry to overthrow the Norman Manley government. This little bit of context would have gone a long way to explain why the Rastas were rounded up after the outbreak of violence in 1963. What really happened at Coral Gardens? The Coral Gardens riot was a revenge attack by a group of Rastas on the local police. It was led by a radical Rastafarian, Rudolph Benjamin Franklin, who had promised to retaliate for having been evicted months earlier from the property on which he had been squatting. The prime tourism property belonged to the Carjarret family, which had large landholdings in the vicinity. Aware of the land hunger among the ordinary people, the Carjarrets turned a blind eye to the squatters in the hinterlands and would later give land to the government for distribution to small farmers. Franklin knew he could have gotten away with squatting in the interior, but he chose the location at Coral Gardens, a prime tourism property, because he was a radical and was making a political statement. At some time in the previous year, Franklin had attacked with a machete the policeman who had escorted the overseer, John Fowler, to present the eviction order. The policeman shot Franklin, he was hospitalized and then jailed, and he swore he would take his revenge. On that fateful April day, Franklin led his followers onto the property, chopped Fowler to death, and then left to attack the nearby police post. In the confrontation, a police inspector and a popular corporal named Melbourne were chopped to death, and a constable named Campbell was crippled by machete wounds. Franklin and at least 2 of his lieutenants were shot dead in the violence, but 2 of his men were held, charged for the murder of the policeman, and hanged in 1964. When the news of the violence broke, Bustamante, fearing a repetition of the 1960 insurrection, ordered a roundup of all Rastas. In this, he had the support of Norman Manley, who thereby repaid the support Buster had given to him in the Henry Uprising. A large number of Rastas were rounded up in 1963. Many of them were shaved by the police, and a group in Montego Bay cell were doused with a hose when they said they were thirsty and needed water. But there was no murder by the agents of the state, no massacre, and anyone who makes that claim is a liar. In fact, the detained men were released as soon as things became clear. Less than 5 of them were charged with minor offenses for which they were wanted and which had nothing to do with Franklin's riot. Much of the violence against the Rastas, the roping and the beating, was done by vigilante groups of citizens who were enraged at the murder of the popular corporal and who were in any case hostile to the new movement that was at the time just 30 years old. Many Rastas were saved in life and limb by the police intervening to protect them from irate citizens. We need to be clear that the police action was not an act of persecution of the Rastas. It was aimed at putting down a perceived insurrection. Nor were Franklin and his band representative of the mainline Rasta movement. He was a radical who was under the influence of local radicals and radical elements at the UWI. They met at night in the PWD workshop on Hart Street in Montego Bay. In the writer's interview with cultists from the nearby village of Flankers, he was told that Franklin's radical ideas did not appeal to the local Rastas, and they disapproved of his attack on the police, which brought a calamity upon them. Life soon returned to normal in the West, and the incident might have been forgotten, except that certain people decided to fabricate a tale of persecution and massacre for political, financial, or intellectual gain. The Rastas were only briefly detained. There was no persecution, no murder, and no massacre at Coral Gardens. The stories you are being told are not true. How long is it?